Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be doing my top 10 favorite manhwa that have towers in them. Towers, obviously, in this context means something you're going to be climbing level by level in order to reach the top. There's a bunch of manhwa that cover this type of storyline. Let's jump right into it. Starting off with an honorable mention, because I did not want to put it near the top of the list, Soul Leveling has a tower climb within its storyline, kind of as a sub-game for Sung Jin-woo to get stronger in. There is definitely climbing the different floors with it, but it's done pretty quickly and isn't the primary concept of the story, so here it is with an honorable mention. If you haven't read Soul Leveling, you should probably read it. At number 10 is I'm the One Loved by the Constellations. This manhwa follows a main character that fails at climbing the tower at the 89th floor, getting ever so close to climbing the Soul Tower, but as he passes and isn't blessed by the constellations, he finds himself, well, in another world where he meets himself and himself and himself. And he finds out that he has basically failed many, many times, and he had different skill sets and different lives. And this is his chance basically to pass on this knowledge and these skills to the next version of himself to become stronger. This one's pretty interesting. The concept is a little different what you're going for. Tower manhwa tend to be a little repetitive and generic in some ways, but I find that this one's setup kind of does things in an interesting way. Its art style is honestly quite good and interesting. The reason it's at number 10 is I don't think the execution and the storyline is that great, but I think it's real worth checking out, absolutely. At number 9 is The Tutorial is Too Hard. I can't tell you how much I really enjoyed this one when I started reading it. This idea of this egotistical main character that like got game-like world becomes real kind of thing, or a game system becomes real, and he chooses the hardest difficulty because he's a cocky game player, and he suffers through it, and everyone else basically in the world is going through the easy mode or the normal mode, and he's one of the few people that's actually doing this thing on hard mode, facing challenges at every turn. There's some really interesting, intricate like details in the dungeon designs of the floors in this one. But once again, I think it isn't quite living up to the promise that it had. I think I'll still think it's worth checking out, absolutely. And there's some interesting interactions with some other characters within the storyline. But I really like the level of challenge that he faces, while also leveraging his amazing skill that he's developed by being a video game player. It's something that I find kind of touches to those of us that have played so many video games in our lives, and you're like, hey, these skills are actually kind of useful, so it's kind of awesome. Check it out, guys. At number 8 is the Tutorial Towers Advanced Player. Alright, this one has not a ton of chapters, but still some stuff to get your teeth into. Follows a main character that is kind of stuck in a tower for the first few chapters. He's basically climbed this tower repeatedly over time, and every time people reach the top, they're supposed to be able to exit this tower with like the riches and the skills and all these different things. However, he has been stuck restarting the tower every single time, and he's basically turned into a guide for people to climb this tower as easy as possible, but he's also using it as an opportunity to see if maybe he hits a certain amount of times, he'll be able to exit this stupid tower. And his final run manages to get out, but that setup of why he's so powerful kind of reminds me of Limit Breaker a lot. If you've read Limit Breaker, where a character gets kind of stuck in a glitch and he becomes extremely powerful, this is kind of the same concept of that, except with a little bit of a different setting in the context of the story. But do check it out. It's definitely worth it. I think I really like the art style, and I like the setup quite a bit. At number 7 is SSS Class Suicide Hunter. This one, you might be surprised, is at number 7 because a lot of people love this manhwa, and I think it does something super interesting. The way the character learns his skills and kind of the patheticness of our protagonist and how he gains this unique ability to absorb someone's special powers is kind of great. Like, I find it has a really original concept for its setup. It has some great fights in the storyline, and a character that isn't afraid to do some not so great things to get the power that he wants. I think the art style is on point for this one, and I don't think you will be disappointed if you take a read at it. I think it has some weaker arcs, in all honesty, and some of the powers he tries to get, I just wasn't that interested in the dynamic that they created. However, overall, it's a fun manhwa, definitely worth checking out. At number 6 is The Player That Can't Level Up. The Player That Can't Level Up could have easily been a very generic fare that didn't achieve anything, and in some ways it kind of is. This one came out and was running while Soul Leveling was running, and definitely didn't stand up to it, but it kind of had two stories with leveling concepts, and the way it touched on the things that the player can't level up in a world where others level up was literally the opposite of Soul Leveling. Well, he was the one leveling up, and no one else could. Doing that, but however, the art style wasn't quite living up to what you would like to see in this kind of series, and it still isn't today, but it has its own unique flair and style, and it's managed to build a really interesting power system based on egos. Weapons, swords, armors that basically have souls in them that are powerful in their own right, and make the main character have a ton of interesting abilities. And what I find good about this series is not so much the powers. It has good fights, but I'm actually liking how big they're making this world feel. With demons, with different clans from other areas of the world, you're feeling a little bit of the vibes that you got from Soul Leveling when the world expanded into it not just being Korea and became like, oh, like these are the world elite, the world rankers. But I think the storytelling is a lot better than Soul Leveling in the case of this one. If only it could step up its art style a little bit, far higher on this list, if just it had its art style up a little bit. At number 5 is Return of the Frozen Player. Listen, this one a little while ago I probably wouldn't have put so high up here. I wasn't updated on it, and to be honest, I kind of started reading it a few years ago and dropped it after like 4 chapters. I was reading too many new things at the time, and it just didn't quite grab me enough. But I got back into it recently, and I really like the way they've set up the towers, the way the people of Earth view the towers as a benefit to them, but also on how critical it is to conquer these different floors, how important the main character is, his ambitions to save his allies that were frozen as well. And it came off of its seasonal break recently, which has made it release new chapters that obviously brings interest back into the manhwa. I was struggling a little bit on where to put this one versus The Player That Can't Level Up, because I read them around the same time originally. I found they were very comparable. I found the art a little bit better of Return of the Frozen Player. I liked the setup. I found it a little bit more interesting than the setup for The Player That Can't Level Up. However, over time, The Player That Can't Level Up has shown itself to be an amazing storyline series, and I think Frozen Player still has some room to go on that one, but I think it has the potential nonetheless. So I'm putting it just a little bit higher. At number 4 is Second Life Ranker, a manhwa that is well known by many people, but I feel like it's still slept on by a lot of people for some strange reason. Second Life Ranker follows a protagonist whose brother got betrayed, and he goes on this adventure, on this quest to climb a tower to find those that were responsible for betraying his brother, get revenge, and find out all that happened. He has a diary from his brother that helps him along the way. And what I will say about Second Life Ranker that I think is better at than most other series, it's just good at world building. There is a lot of characters in this manhwa, and it makes them interesting enough that you know who they are. You might not care about all of them, but they're in the story enough for you to kind of get to know these different people. And some of them follow the main protagonist around for some reasons that you'll find out by reading it. But I've really enjoyed how it's done its world building. Honestly, probably better than all the other manhwa on this list except for one. Just the world building is vast, it's very good. For some reason, the art style doesn't work that well for me. I think some panels are really nice, but the art style feels really stiff to me. I might be crazy about this. Give me your opinion on that. Are you a big fan of the art style of Second Life Ranker, and how do you feel about it? And also, how do you feel about this list in general? Would you have other things that you'd put on this list higher up? Are the things I've forgotten? Drop it in. Like and subscribe while you're there. At number 3 is Tower of God. I had to put it on this list, obviously, and I might be blaspheming by putting it at number 3, but this is personal taste. Tower of God has something that for me it doesn't work in Manhwa that much, and this is a me thing. It's not has nothing to do with the writing. If nothing, I think Tower of God is a masterpiece, and in all honesty, in Manhwa, it probably deserves to be at the top of most lists, just for the scale of world building and detail into the games and all the different things that have gone on. But for me, it doesn't work as much because of the ensemble context of Tower of God. There are so many characters in Tower of God, and they spend a lot of time on a lot of them, and the reality is you don't care about a lot of them. This might be a me thing. Tell me how you feel about that. Are there some groups of characters you just can't care about? This really happened for me, and there were some chapters that were just not interesting to me because I was not invested in their storyline or what they were fighting for or what their objectives were or what their relationships was to the main character. I only cared about the primary trio and some sporadic characters here and there, as well as the different princesses of Jihad. Those ones were all cool characters, but I feel like the ensemble got too big with too many different things going on. The other thing was, while there are things called Deus Ex Machinas in stories where there's one item that allows a character to fix any problem, in this Manhwa, the games are continuously acting as Deus Ex Machinas. They're giving circumstances that'll prevent the fights just at the right moment. They're conveniently made in such a way as to create the perfect circumstances for certain things to happen. And after a while, I started expecting it, and it kept getting in the way of some of the things I wanted to see happening, like purposefully slowing down the pace of the Manhwa. Tell me if you felt that. I had some games that I really enjoyed. I think it's all clever and well done, but I think that there's some games I really enjoyed and some things that were just annoying me because I'm like, just get to the plot already. This is not relevant at the time being. You're just doing something to extend the story. Something that I don't feel is done quite the same way in other Manhwa. At number 2 is Leveling with the Gods. I think Leveling with the Gods is very, very good at storytelling. It's done a good job with mythology and done a good job at world building its tower. The protagonist, the setup of the first few chapters of the character that's sent back in time by Kronos to find basically start over again and this time try and win once they reach the top of the tower was good. Like it's you always need a starting point, and this is about as generic and stereotypical as you can get. Character gets sent back in time. He tries to climb the tower again, does different things. I mean, it is what it is. But what it's done with like mythology, playing with Hercules, playing with these different characters and pantheons has been super interesting to me and feels researched. It feels tight. When you watch and you read a lot of these manhwa, you feel like there's a lot of these special power-like things that get created, and you don't feel like the story is that tight. You're not necessarily getting the item you need to accomplish your goal. You're getting this all-powerful sword that does everything. But in this manhwa, you're kind of given the things you need for the moment. You have some stuff that's set up for later. You have a weaponsmith that's making these amazing weapons for the protagonist, but he needs to gather the items he needs for it. It has that little like gathering and building vibe with it because of that. And all around that is a shell of beautiful art. An art style that's very different from most stuff you're going to see out there. Nicely detailed and just has a good vibe. Why is it number 1? I'll tell you in 2 seconds. At number 1 is Solo Max Level Newbie. And I know, I chose the one that is the most close to solo leveling that exists. Hell, the name even looks like it. But I think Solo Max Level Newbie is better than solo leveling in a lot of ways. Like, honestly, most ways. Once it wraps up its story and puts a tight little bow at the end of it, most likely it will end up being higher in solo leveling on the ranking for me. Most likely solo leveling drop off that S tier for what it does because there'll be something that did it a lot better, and that's Solo Max Level Newbie. The reason I say that is the setup for the story, not as good as solo leveling. Those first few chapters of solo leveling, honestly, are great storytelling, and where solo leveling was great at story. That's the only time it was good at story, but that was the moment. The setup, game system, game becomes real life. Not the most original concept. you have to start climbing this tower. Main character is a amazing player at video games, specifically the video game that this is based off of, but what this manhwa is phenomenal at is itemization. It has done so much itemization with, again, those gods referenced that it has really grabbed me. Items in manhwa are not unique. There's a bunch of other manhwa with a ton of itemization, even some that might have a little bit better. But on the tower climbing genre, using these items in very effective ways where he's able to find novel solutions to be defeating certain things on certain floors means that he's achieving things that others simply can't. He does suffer from being the OP protagonist where he's better than everyone else at everything, and we know that'll never end as he climbs a tower. But again, they did something really good with this manhwa is that they gave him some people around him to leverage and use. I really say use because he uses them to build an ensemble and build a larger team around him, which allows relationships to be built for storyline purposes, because manhwa suffers often from having the stoic main character that doesn't engage with other characters in any real way. And I think this is still a challenge for this manhwa because I don't think he's investing in these relationships as much, but you still see these moments in the story so far where he cares. And I'm hopeful if they continue along this route, build out the ensemble, build out the other characters around him, I think this manhwa has some amazing potential for the future. Guys, if you agree, if you disagree, leave a comment down below on what you think. Shout out to ZZ, by the way, who had the idea for this top 10 list. I will try and shout you guys out if ever you give me ideas for these manhwa lists before I come up with them myself. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great one.